Good morning. Welcome to Nora Unitarian Universalist Church. Welcome to you who are joining us from your homes and you who are here on the hill having braved the wind. It is good to be together. There are some announcements in your order of service. We'll have a Zoom check-in and conversation on Wednesday evening at 7 o'clock. I'll send out, it's the same link we've been using now for 2 years, but I'll send it out in a grapevine on Wednesday, so you make sure you have it. The board meeting is a week from Wednesday, on the 16th. If you have anything you would like to bring before the board, Jeannie's here today to hear what you have to say. And there is, you may have noticed when you got your February newsletter, an unexpected service coming up. We had decided, the board and the program committee and I, that in January and February we would have just one service, but the congregation in Bemidji, the Headwaters Unitarian Universalist congregation, has invited us to join them in a Zoom service on February 27th. So you will also hear more about that in upcoming grapevines. Are there additional announcements this morning? Okay, let's make the organ side of the church Group A and the piano side of the church Group B for our hymns this morning. Go to the winter woods. Listen there, look, watch, and the dead months will give you a subtler secret than any you have yet found in the forest. There is a candle in the heart ready to be kindled. There is a void in the soul ready to be filled. So it is time and again that as our first act of worship, we light a flame in the heart of this gathered community and bid the Spirit enter our soul. Does anybody need an order of service for the hymns? Okay. Jeannie's going to get you one. Kale, did you get one? Okay, Jeannie, Kale needs an order of service also. So we're not singing yet, but we are reading our hymns antiphonally. So they're on the inside of your order of service. The organ side of the church will read the parts labeled A. The piano side of the church will read the parts labeled B, and we'll all read the parts labeled all. And Sally will just play through a verse first. Here we have gathered side by side, circle of kinship, come and step inside. May all who seek here find a kindly word. May all who speak here feel they have been heard. Sing now together this our heart's own song. Here we have gathered, called to celebrate days of our lifetime, matters small and great. We of all ages, living out our span, infants and sages, sharing what we can. Sing now together this our heart's own song. Life has its battles, sorrows, and regret, but in the shadows let us not forget. We who now gather know each other's pain. Kindness can heal us. As we give, we gain. Sing now in friendship this our heart's own song. It's time for our story. The story this morning is called Sorry. In a little house perched on a hilltop high in the mountains of the North Country lived two brothers, Ebenezer and Obadiah. Their names, Ebenezer and Obadiah, their names were. Ebenezer was tall as a long drink of spring water. Obadiah was lean as a pitchfork. They lived together on a poor farm with more rocks than good soil, more winter than summer sun. Ebenezer cooked, Obadiah cleaned. Ebenezer walked behind Nellie, the gray old mare, as she pulled the plow. Obadiah milked Bertha, the cow. And in the evenings, they both sat on the porch playing tunes. Ebenezer on his fiddle, Obadiah on his mouth organ, till the sun went down. One morning, when the winter had been hanging on so long it looked like it would never let go, Ebenezer cooked up a nice hot pot of oatmeal. "Snowed again," he said. "Yep," said Obadiah. The brothers never did talk much. They ate a while. "Lumps," said Obadiah. "Lumps?" said Ebenezer. "Not in my oatmeal." "Lumps," said Obadiah. Something came over Ebenezer then. Too much winter or too much pride. He picked up Obadiah's bowl and turned it over his brother's head. Obadiah was so surprised he just sat there with the bowl on his head like a hat, oatmeal dripping down. All that day the brothers didn't talk at all. Ebenezer was waiting for Obadiah to say he was sorry. Obadiah was waiting for Ebenezer to say he was sorry. Ebenezer cooked for himself. Obadiah tried to cook for himself. He burned everything. Still, neither one said a word. Silence hung over the little house like a heavy, wet coat. Days crawled by. Ebenezer noticed that Obadiah never picked up his socks. Obadiah noticed that Ebenezer had a bothersome way of whistling out of tune. It got so they couldn't bear to look at each other. Obadiah moved to one end of the house. Ebenezer stayed on the other. Still, they sometimes met in the kitchen. One day, when the snow had finally turned to mud and leaves were popping out green on the trees, Ebenezer heard the buzz of a saw. Looking out, he saw Obadiah cutting the house in half. "Stop," he wanted to shout, "I'm sorry." But he didn't. Obadiah hauled away his half of the house along with Bertha, the milk cow. He set them down on the next hilltop. Now it was quieter than ever. Ebenezer got up early and worked late, plowing and planting his corn. When he finished, he began clearing a second field. In the evenings, he was so tired he could barely move, but the quiet was still there. Ebenezer played his fiddle till it fell from his hand. Obadiah felt the quiet too. He got so he talked to Bertha while he milked her. She gave so much milk that he started selling it in town. Pretty soon he bought another cow and another. They needed a barn, so Obadiah got busy building. But in the evenings he had to go inside where the quiet was. Obadiah played his mouth organ till he ran out of tunes. Sometimes when the breeze was just right, the brothers could hear each other playing. They were sad and lonesome sounds. A year passed. Ebenezer kept clearing more fields and planting more corn. Obadiah kept selling more milk and buying more cows. His cows liked to wander, and once in a while they got into Ebenezer's corn, so Ebenezer piled up rocks till he had built a wall to keep them out. At harvest time, he took his corn to the mill. "Howdy do," said the miller. He was the first person Ebenezer had talked to in over a year. All afternoon he sat in the shade and talked to the miller and his daughter. Her name was Susanna, and she had hair like corn silk. In the spring, Ebenezer and Susanna were married. Soon after that, Obadiah got tired of talking to his cows, who never talked back, and spoke to Abigail, the schoolmistress. Her soft brown eyes reminded him of Bertha's, but he didn't tell her that. By fall, they were married. With their wives' help, the brothers' farms prospered. Ebenezer's cornfield spread uphill and down, and Obadiah had the largest, most contented herd of cows in all the North Country. Ebenezer built his wall longer and stouter to keep them out. When his first son was born, Ebenezer was fit to bust his buttons with pride. He wanted to shout the news to Obadiah, "Caleb is here." But then he remembered. He took down his fiddle and played the most rollicking, joyful tune. Over on his hilltop, Obadiah heard it, and he knew. Before long, he had a baby girl of his own. To celebrate, Obadiah planted an apple tree right next to Ebenezer's wall. When the wind rustled the leaves, they seemed to say, "Sophie is here." In his cornfield, Ebenezer heard it, and he knew. The years marched by. Ebenezer had 6 strapping sons. Obadiah had 5 daughters with soft brown eyes and a whole orchard of apple trees. Sometimes the brothers passed each other on the way to town, but they never spoke. "Why?" asked Caleb when he was old enough to wonder. "Lumps," was all his father would say. Caleb and his brothers puzzled over that long and hard. Lumps of coal? Lumps on the head like goose eggs? It had to be something terrible. No doubt about it, Uncle Obadiah was a bad man. "Upside down on my head." Sophie and her sisters wondered what that could mean. Upside down in a snowdrift? Upside down in the pig pen? It had to be something dreadful. No doubt about it, Uncle Ebenezer was a mean man. Caleb and his brothers built the wall longer. It snaked uphill and down, making each farm look like a fortress. Generations passed. Ebenezer and Obadiah had grandchildren, then great-grandchildren. No one in either family ever spoke to the other, though they couldn't remember why. Rumor had it that Obadiah had stolen Ebenezer's cows, or maybe Ebenezer had cheated Obadiah out of his land. The brothers were very old men now. They sat by the fire and seldom said a word. Now and then Ebenezer would pick up his fiddle, or Obadiah his mouth organ, but they played too softly to be heard on the next hilltop. One summer day, a boy named Nathaniel, Ebenezer's great-grandson, was sent to inspect the wall between the farms. "Something's been getting into our corn," his father said. "It must be those fool cows." The very same day, a boy named Luther, Obadiah's great-grandson, was sent to look over the wall. Somebody's been helping themselves to our apples, his mother said. We've only been able to pick 12 bushels this year. Nathaniel looked, but he couldn't find anything wrong. As he sat down to rest, something fell out of the sky right into his hand. It was an apple. He was about to take a bite when a voice said, "That's my apple." On the other side of the wall, scowling at him, was a boy. "So you're the one been stealing our apples," said the boy. "Must be you're the one getting into our corn," answered Nathaniel. They stood staring and glaring and doubling up their fists. "Isn't this just like that miserable old Ebenezer?" Luther was thinking. "What can you expect from that ornery old Obadiah?" Nathaniel was thinking. Something came over Nathaniel then. All that warm summer sun or all that loneliness. He did a most peculiar thing. "Sorry," he said. Luther just stared. He couldn't figure out what to say. He opened his mouth and all that came out was a smile. "We maybe could trade," he said when he recovered himself, "some of your corn for some of my apples." "We maybe could," said Nathaniel. The two boys, cousins they were, sat side by side on the stone wall with their feet dangling down, and they talked and ate apples and laughed till the sun went down. "Joy and woe are woven fine," wrote William Blake, "and when this we rightly know, safely through the world we go. Because we daily live the truth in the poet's words, we pause each time we gather to worship, however and wherever we gather to worship, to speak into the loving container of this community, our joys and our sorrows."
I have two candles, one bitter and one bittersweet. The first is my niece Nora, who celebrated 10 years of being cancer-free in September, is now battling esophageal cancer. So she's just been through her second chemo, and the coming months are not going to be any fun. And the second candle, the bittersweet, is my sister-in-law Ruby is moving into Ridgeway on German, and while we feel good that it will be a happier and safer place, it's also that difficult transition of giving up your home and independence. So some tough times.
Several candles of sorrow this morning for the students, faculty, staff, and family members of South Education Center in Richfield, whose lives were ended and started anew by the shooting. For the family and friends of Amir Locke, whose lives were also destroyed, even as they still live, at his death. For 900,000 Americans dead of COVID. And knowing that all of these shooting deaths and the 900,000 deaths from COVID, each one stands for many more that we never know about. And the sorrow is wide and the sorrow is heavy. And a candle for the people of Ukraine, not knowing what is happening, what's to come. And one candle of joy for having one of our own return to us after a long hiatus. And I will light a final candle for all that remains unspoken. Let us hold all of our joys and our sorrows in our hearts as we enter a spirit of meditation. Does the calendar turning to Sunday bring us here, or our souls longing? The habit of long years, or a yearning urgent and newborn? Yes. Do we seek solace for the world's trouble or our private pain? Companion in our loneliness or in our joy? Yes. Will this community's embrace awaken us or put our fears to rest? Heal us or celebrate our wholeness? Yes. Do we ask that the silent speak to us or listen to us? That we find answers or ask new questions? Yes. Into the stillness we go, human, holy, and precious. From the stillness we emerge, human, holy, precious. Amen. The ongoing life and work of this church depends upon our gifts to it. The morning offering will now be given and received for the support of Nora Unitarian Universalist Church. As we sing in grateful thanksgiving for gifts both given and received, except we won't sing, we will recite and we will do so in unison. Hymn number 123, Spirit of Life. Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my hand all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, dies in the sea. Move in the hand, bringing life, the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me. Our first reading this morning comes from a Unitarian Universalist minister, Jake Morrill, who serves in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. He wrote on Facebook recently, "Earlier this week, the McMinn County School Board voted 10-0 to censor the Pulitzer Prize-winning graphic novel Mouse, the story of the Holocaust as relayed through a father-son dialogue and depicted by cartoon mice. The best response I've read," he writes, "is your kids have access to TikTok and the full internet. Books are not your problem." Of course, the McMinn County School Board's decision was unwise, based in small-minded political correctness. When the national media storm dies down, I bet they'll find a quiet way to reverse the decision. I don't know if they have the leadership in them to reflect on what brought them to such a panicked move so they can lead better next time. But here's what I want to say. While it's easy to tell the story of a frightened school board using their power to censor an important work of art, the reality is more complicated. For instance, I'll bet that all 10 of those misguided school board members have done great acts of compassion and generosity in their lives. Their lives are not defined by one really bad decision. There's more to their story. They're not beyond redemption. They're not villains. I find hope in that. And McMinn County, I know for a fact, isn't defined by their school board. Telling the full story includes how the community that these school board members failed is responding. This week, a nearby Episcopal church in Athens is hosting a reading of Mouse and a discussion of the Holocaust, taking up the important educational work that the school board made impossible to happen in school. Nirvana Comics in Knoxville is giving out as many free copies of Mouse as they can. On Amazon, so many copies of Mouse have been sold in recent days that they are now out of stock. I bet that the 8th graders in McMinn County who may not have cared too much about this reading assignment are now highly motivated to engage this literature that adults find so dangerous. I bet some people in McMinn County who were content to disengage from the democratic process are now considering a run for school board. This isn't about making lemonade out of lemons. The school board decision was wrong, and elected officials need to be held accountable for letting themselves serve as puppets to fear. But we, the public, are responsible for widening the camera lens to tell a broader story than clickbait permits. Clickbait media is designed to produce shock and alarm by depicting a landscape of heroes and villains, us and them. Clickbait thinking compels us to snap judgment and the cheap satisfaction of certitude. Anytime we find ourselves ensnared by clickbait, we have the chance to slow down and get curious, the chance to think more. Great literature like Mouse can help us learn how. As we engage it, we learn to engage an ambiguous, uncertain world. That capacity allows us to see and try more paths ahead in our current challenges than if we let our thinking get yanked here and there by clickbait outrage. Clickbait thinking leaves us brittle, divided, subject to despair. It's the sugar high before the crash. But as we get better at seeing and telling and living the whole messy story with more angles and actors, we find ourselves more resilient and resourceful, and better at helping bring forth a future that includes and protects the worth and dignity of all of us. Through my work at the library, I've become aware of the News Literacy Organization, and I've been posting some of those things to Nora's website, and it's a great organization for helping us figure out clickbait and disingenuous misinformation, and if you want to know more, just let me know. Our second reading, a poem by Karen Boy, translated from the Swedish by David Macduff. Yes, of course it hurts when buds are breaking. Why else would the springtime falter? Why would all our ardent longing bind itself in frozen, bitter pallor? After all, the bud was covered all winter. What new thing is it that bursts and wears? Yes, of course it hurts when buds are breaking. Hurts for that which grows and that which bars. Yes, it is hard when drops are falling, trembling with fear and heavy hanging, cleaving to the twig and swelling, sliding. Weight draws them down, though they go on clinging. Hard to be uncertain, afraid and divided. Hard to feel the depths attract and call, yet sit fast and merely tremble. Hard to want to stay and want to fall. Then, when things are worst and nothing helps, the tree's buds break as in rejoicing then. When no fear holds them back any longer, down in glitter go the twigs' drops, plunging. Forget that they were frightened by the new. Forget their fear before the flight unfurled. Feel for a second their greatest safety. Rest in that trust that creates the world. Here end the readings. Our hymn is number 55, Dark of Winter. Dark of winter, soft and still. Let quiet calm surrounds me. Let my thoughts go where they will. Ease my mind profoundly. And then my soul will sing a song, a blessed song of love eternal. Gentle darkness, soft and still, bring your quiet to me. Darkness, soothe my weary eyes, that I may see more clearly. When my heart with sorrow cries, comfort and caress me. And then my soul may hear a voice, a still small voice of love eternal. Darkness, when my fears arise, let your peace flow through me. I drove to Comfrey on Friday morning, though I guess I just as easily could have driven from Mankato this morning. Every once in a while, I got a glimpse of the sky. Above and beyond the driving, swirling snow, it was a brilliant sunlit winter blue. But for much of the way, seemingly long, perilous miles, I couldn't see more than a few yards in front of the car. Our landscape was showing its February face. That label comes from Much Ado About Nothing. Don Pedro greets Benedict. Why, what's the matter that you have such a February face, so full of frost, of storm, and cloudiness? The bard had a way with words. I've been noticing lots of human February faces full of frost, of storm, of cloudiness. Friends falling out, co-workers with formerly good professional relationships calling into question one another's dedication to the job, terse emails, a Facebook friend giving notice that they find Wordle score notifications extremely annoying and that they are therefore blocking them. Another admonishing their followers in all caps, you know that means they're screaming, to reread their post before commenting because replies posted so far make it clear that readers weren't getting the point of the original post. And my own February face, from which I sneered as I silently snarled at my friends, read the notifications. Don't read the notifications, but do you have to tell us you're not going to read them? And when have responses to social media posts ever really had much to do with the original post? Stop trying to control behavior that is not controllable and isn't of much consequence anyway. That may not have been my only eruption of February face, and may not have been the stormiest one either. It's not a common expression, February face, so I'm taking the liberty of perhaps giving the description more meaning than Shakespeare intended. I'm choosing to view our February faces as real but temporary incarnations of ourselves. And this choice is rooted solidly in my universalism. All that freshly fallen, dry snow whipped into the air by fierce winds Friday morning and this morning was real. It was a not rare weather phenomenon for this time of year. The conditions it created for travelers by car or by foot was tiresome at best, dangerous at worst. But just as real and not rare for this time of year were the blue sky and sunshine visible now and then when the wind died down or farmsteads interrupted its path. Like the February face of the weather, the human February faces, February moods and utterances and actions so many of us have been displaying, these are real and true to our natures. And they, while perhaps not quite as common in the before times, are certainly not rare as we approach the second anniversary of the full impact of COVID here in Minnesota. But they are also not our only faces, moods, utterances, and actions. They are not our only true nature. Behind their whiteout conditions, there is sunshine and blue sky. A friend living in a part of the country hit by this week's winter's 1-2 punch of snow and ice remarked that she loves the morning after an ice storm because it's like waking up in a world made of crystal. We've all gasped at that particular otherworldly loveliness. I would argue that we've all also experienced a similar, almost unreal transformation in the wake of human storms. Now, it is wise and can be life-saving sometimes to be wary of the sparkling, crystalline conditions that follow some human ice storms, for their brilliant beauty is also temporary, can be brittle, and may be hiding conditions no less perilous than the storm itself. But sometimes the breathtaking, awe-inspiring effect of sunlight on ice-covered landscapes of human relationships is redemptive. At the library, I'm on the listserv of the Association of Small and Rural Libraries. Several months ago, the email chain was ablaze with anger, mistrust, accusations, counter-accusations, name-calling, and resignations over a vaccine requirement and mask mandate for in-person participation in the annual conference of the association. Yes, librarians. Then one of the founders of the association died, and the tenor of emails for the next few days changed completely as remembrances poured forth. It seems this man had had the lovely practice of addressing all his correspondence to dear friends and kind people. Colleague after colleague recalled his professional acumen and his advocacy for libraries, but mostly they repeated his greeting, "Dear friends and kind people." It was as if the sun had dawned after a storm, revealing the glittering beauty of friendship and acquaintance and shared professional commitments. The public vitriol over COVID precautions at the fast-approaching convention receded, and it did not return even after the remembrances themselves faded from the listserv. I don't know any of these librarians and library directors other than as names that most of the time seek examples of best policies and practices or brag about successful and innovative programs or ask for help with thorny personnel or patron issues. Despite this lack of acquaintance, I feel confident in saying that the fear and the anger, the judgment and the retaliatory judgment were real, and to some degree probably true to the nature of those involved in the fray. But their affection for the one who died was real too, and their passion for their mission of offering library services to small and rural communities, and their eagerness to offer the rest of us whatever help and support and hard-earned expertise they have, are just as real and true to their nature as well. We are, all of us, making all kinds of poor decisions and hasty judgments these days, speaking aloud things better left unsaid, acting without cooling off periods or reconsideration, and not one of us, as the saying goes, is as bad as our worst choice or our most awful moment. Obadiah was more than his complaint about lumps in the oatmeal. Ebenezer was more than the bowl of oatmeal he turned upside down on his brother's head. And we are, all of us, holy. Our February face, even if we show it in January or June or October, is not our only true nature. I was as aghast as you might have been when the news broke about the school board in Tennessee banning the graphic novel Mouse. And yes, I indulged in angry, fear-based judgment directed toward those school board members and toward the ones who brought the complaint in the first place. But I was grateful and still am for my colleague Jake Morrell's words. Wise and thoughtful colleagues have raised serious objections to his take on the situation, arguing that we must be more vigilant against racism and authoritarianism, and more rigorous in our efforts to combat them on every front. Even I think his belief that the school board will eventually find a way to reverse course quietly and under the radar of public notice is unrealistic, or at least overly optimistic. History has shown us that just because a rule, a regulation, or a law is unjust or ridiculous or passed hastily without due consideration of ramifications doesn't mean that it won't remain on the books and in practice for a long, long time. But Jake, living and serving in Tennessee, is closer to the ground than I am. So I am willing to defer to his assessment, mostly because it is solidly grounded in universalism. My Unitarian Universalism calls me to affirm the holiness of everyone, every single discrete individual one of us, whether I'm able to discern that holiness in action, being or not. No exceptions for fear-based stupidity. No exceptions for those who would ban or burn books. No exception for those whose February face is so entrenched, so omnipresent that I have never and will never see any hint of the sun or the calm behind it. And frankly, I'm with Jake on this. In my better moments, I know that the February face of most local school board members is nowhere near that entrenched or omnipresent, no matter how disgusting I may find some of their decisions and actions. Obadiah and Ebenezer were stubborn beyond all reason, and they suffered for it to the end of their days. But they made music, each of them, and brought forth life, and stewarded the land, and found love, and inspired loyalty in their offspring, who were finally able to find a way past bitterness and suspicion to shared laughter all afternoon long. In C.S. Lewis's The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, when Lucy and Edmund, Peter and Susan first pass through the wardrobe and emerge into Narnia, they discover a land locked into an endless winter without Christmases and without any hope of spring. February in Minnesota, right? And the pandemic feels like that most of the time, now that we are into year 3 and over 900,000 deaths in this country alone. But wind-driven whiteouts here in Minnesota or monstrous snowstorms in New England, while the reality of our weather some of the time are not the totality of our weather. Not only was there sunshine somewhere above and beyond the snow-filled air on Friday morning, but winter will end with the coming of spring, even if it's not as soon as we would like it to be. And our February faces will give way to May faces of blooming and September faces of harvesting. But our hope, my hope, lies neither solely in my universalism nor simply on the eventual turning of the seasons. It lies also in my understanding of what the natural world tells us is happening even now in the depth of winter, under the face of February. When Brooke tells me it's time to send her a quote for the next month's calendar, I sometimes turn to a website called Garden Digest. It's nothing more than an amazing, lengthy compilation of snippets of writing about the natural world. That's where I found a February face, and it's where I found a comfort and a hope beyond that knowledge that neither Minnesota's winter nor our current extended, pervasive national February will last forever. It's where I found reminders that even now, just halfway to the vernal equinox, the cold and dark, frost and snow of dormancy are in fact the cradle of landscapes first stirring toward new life. In the words of William Cullen Bryant, the February sunshine steeps your boughs and tints the buds and swells the leaves within. In the words of Barbara Winkler, every gardener knows that under the cloak of winter lies a miracle, a seed waiting to sprout, a bulb opening to the light, a bud straining to unfurl. In the words of Helen Hunt Jackson, still lie the sheltering snows, undimmed and white, and reigns the winter's pregnant silence still. No sign of spring save that the catkins fill, and willow stems grow daily red and bright. These are days when ancients held a rite of expiation for the old world's ill, and a prayer to purify the new year's will. And in the ancient Celtic and in the neo-pagan calendars, Imbolc at the beginning of February is the season of pregnant expectation and hidden potential, of unseen quickening and stirring. It is one thing to accept grudgingly that every stinking one of us is held by love, worthy by love to a degree and in a way beyond our understanding, even though that begrudging and bewildered acceptance is revolutionary. It is one thing to grit our teeth and remind ourselves that this isn't Narnia before the return of Aslan, that we had our Christmas not long ago and spring will come at last. And it is quite another thing to believe, all easy and obvious evidence to the contrary, that spring is coming even now to the trees and the bushes, to the bulbs underground, to our hearts beneath the frost of our February faces and the storms of our February moods. I don't know what is stirring beneath the ice of our entrenched politics, the blizzards of our embattled school boards, the cloudiness of our short tempers and fear-launched attacks on friends and foes alike. I don't know what's coming, what's stirring, and still I'll bet my life on the exquisite beauty and salvific power of it. I know the birth will be painful, messy, agonizingly slow, and explosively sudden. We will be called to be midwives in ways that tax us and bless us. There will be moments birth veers close to death. And still I trust in its advent, this something that is germinating in our hearts and in the souls of our communities. I trust in its arrival in the fullness of time and in its toppling of everything we know and are. Because all that I know of nature and of God and of love, which three are one, tells me that thus it has ever been and ever will be. In the meantime, because February sometimes lasts until June in Minnesota, and because we don't know the gestation period of whatever new life we are called to help bring to birth, let us hold lightly to the fears and the certainties that comprise our February faces, and tightly to the universal love that wraps us, even us, in its embrace, February faces and all. Amen. Our closing hymn is number 128, For All That Is Our Life. For all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad. For needs which others serve, for services we give, for work and its rewards, for hours of rest and love, we come with praise and thanks for all that is our life. For sorrow we must bear, for failures, pain, and loss, for each new thing we learn, for fearful hours that pass, we come with praise and thanks for all that is our life. For all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad. Will you read in unison the words for extinguishing our chalice found in your order of service? The flame has been doused. The fire of our community still burns. In this moment, we become beacons on the prairie, bearers of light and warmth until we gather again to rekindle our communal chalice. Go into the winter woods, listen there, look, watch, and the dead months will give you a subtler secret than any you have yet found in the forest. Go into your winter souls, listen there, look, watch, and the bare starkness will give you subtler secrets than any you have yet found in the profusion of your blossoming. Go into whatever awaits. Listen there, look, watch, and you will be given subtler secrets than any you have yet found anywhere. Amen.